People have fallen in love with misinformation these days, especially on the internet. And one of the biggest problems with social media is the spread of misinformation is kind of uncontrollable, meaning some things can be banned, but for the most part, they will get through, and people are using them as, clickbait or anything like that to make money. I'm not necessarily mad at those people, but there's a lot of people on social media who don't know how to read through the fluff or listen through the fluff or know what is even real anymore. We actually start to question that nowadays. But also, people for the most part are not necessarily looking for the truth. And I've kind of figured this out a while back ago. They're more or less searching for something that aligns with their perspective. And sadly, the internet is a very easy place to find people that will align with your perspective, whether they agree with you or not. Some of them could just be doing it to make money, and that's really hard to decipher. So, this is why I kind of wanted to talk about this. And now, of course, Justice Moraes in Brazil just banned X or Twitter, and even mentioned if you are caught using a VPN, you would be charged up to $9,000 per day for using Twitter inside the country. And that's simply because they want to stop all the misinformation that is spreading. Elon Musk is not agreeing with this, obviously. The people are rallying in the streets of Brazil, but Elon came out and said, Moraes is kind of a dictator and he's shutting down the only source of truth in Brazil. How true is that? I don't know. I don't live in Brazil, but I know people love Twitter. I know that. So ultimately, the sad part about everything I just said is that it's not even the big picture. It's a really small picture in the grand scheme of things. Because then there's TikTok. And I know you guys know about TikTok. I mean, I don't really have to tell you, but hearing DOAC, Diary of a CEO podcast, they had professionals on there telling us that, the dopamine rush that we get from our brains, we really need to learn how to control that because eventually it will not satisfy us. And once we get to that point, we have to get more and more of a dopamine rush to even feel any of the effects. Now, I'm not a neuroscientist or a researcher by any means, but we all know this to be true, especially with dopamine rushes from anything such as foods, candies, drugs, or whatever it may be that can be considered addictive and gives you a dopamine rush. The one dopamine rush lately that I've noticed on TikTok Live is people are pursuing this goal to prove conspiracy theories to be correct. And some of them are so far off, it's kind of even sad to talk about, to be completely honest. And trying to prove researchers wrong that spend their lives studying these subjects and teaching us the things that they have found and what they have learned over time, and these things being updated over time in case we do have better information, seems to be a serious problem for conspiracy theorists. You know, these things that I learned by those in the field are approved by academia. They are tested. Their theories are put to the test over and over and over. We can recreate their theories. We can have a sense of place as to where this theory is even coming from. But nowadays, feelings seem to matter more than reality. So, you know, when you're out there hearing, oh, gravity doesn't exist because it doesn't make sense to me, that's really not a good reason for gravity not to exist, you know. But I'll show you guys some more examples of what I'm hearing on TikTok and the things that people are saying that are just completely blowing my mind. But with everything that I'm hearing on TikTok lives, it's kind of hard to blame China for controlling the type of video content that comes through TikTok for their users. It's really kind of difficult to blame them. I'm starting to understand why they're doing this more and more. I'm actually starting to understand why the US government is wanting to pursue TikTok and get it out of here. It makes a lot of sense. That's all I'm saying. Now, I'm not advocating if what the governments are doing is right or wrong, but I see their argument. I guess that's pretty much what I'm trying to say. Sometimes I do ask myself, with some of the claims that these people make, do they ever test their ideas? Do they ever look into it to seek the truth that they're actually looking for? And, sometimes I hear things that are so off the wall that I'm just wondering, if I'm actually hearing it right. So I always have to send it to friends or something like that to confirm that what I'm hearing is actually what's being said and I'm not making it up, you know, in my own head. So, for example, I've heard things on TikTok said like slavery never happened. Really? Okay. Now that one, look, I'm just gonna go over some of these points. Okay, I'm not even gonna comment on some of these. The one saying that we never went to space and we cannot go to space. They claim there's the dome over the Earth, but they can't find the dome. They claim the sun is 3,000 miles away and it's actually not a physical thing. It's just a light in the sky for some reason that we can see in the sky, but it's not physically there. So, for those spacecraft going up, they actually will never interact with it. Look, I don't know. I don't know. Because at that point, then why do solar panels work? But there's more questions to that. That's not even the beginning of what I would ask for those questions. I've heard people say that they work for companies that build satellites, but satellites themselves do not exist. Do you want to explain that one? Is it that satellites don't exist, or you don't work for the company that builds satellites? Only one of those can be true. Some say that African Americans are not from Africa. They're not related to Africans at all. This is a weird one. This one, I'm not sure where this movement started, but I know there's a big movement going on right now. I've even heard some say that Africans cannot prove that they're African. What? Okay, I'm gonna come back to that. I've also heard people say the largest pyramids in the world and the most pyramids in the world are actually in the United States. I'd like to see those pyramids. Some will say the oldest rainforest in the world is 150,000 years old, and it's actually in New York. It's fairly recent. 150,000 years, that's it. Um, and some say they don't trust academia for anything that is taught in schools. Some say they don't believe in DNA because it doesn't exist. Some will say quantum mechanics is a waste of time because it doesn't exist. Look, I'm trying here, okay? I'm trying to get through all these points without laughing too much, but this is really tough when you hear some of these things and you hear people actually convince themselves of this. You know, some of the questions that I want to always ask is why would experts go to such great lengths to teach us about what they have found and learned and can be tested and reproduced? You know, is it really efficient to ignore peer-reviewed research confirmed by so many experts? I mean, it gets to the point where we start to create a pattern of questions inside these TikTok lives where they're trying to set you up for a gotcha moment. And that's where I think all the lies actually tend to fail when I'm inside of them and I'm listening to people talk. They want simple yes or no answers, almost as if you're in a courtroom for some reason, so they can set you up for the wrong answer later on. And they are not willing to hear you out for any of your reasoning to counter their points. If you're going on those lives, save yourself the time. If you counter their points too much, they will cut you off. They might even cut you out or drop you completely out of the call and block you. Um, so they're not going to be willing to hear out your reasoning or your countering points. So they only allow one person up who's against their ideas, and it's usually going to be you and seven others who will be talking and asking questions. You'll never know which question you're actually on. They will all claim that you're not answering the question because seven questions have come to you and you have to start somewhere. Then they will all jump in and say, but you're not answering the question. They don't want you to speak. If you don't agree with them, they really don't want to talk to you. They just want to try to prove a point to 50 people in TikTok. So if you cut them off while they're speaking, um, you try to make a point that goes against their views, they will still try to defend their point to the ends of the earth. They will drop you out of the call. They will talk bad about you. You can't defend yourself. They will mute you in the chat so you can't type anything. The other day, I tested something myself, and I just wanted to know if I wrote a simple truth, what would they say, or how would people react? And I went in the chat and They were talking about the US, the populations across the states, and things of that nature, where people should be buying land. Why are the rich buying land in all these places? I'm like, did you guys know that most of the American West is vastly empty? You start seeing the eyebrows perk up, the ears are perking out, and they're like, what is wrong with this guy? Where did he go to school? What did he study? This, that, and the third. And all I simply said was most of the West is empty. 80% of the people in the US live east of the 98th meridian. 90th meridian to the West Coast is much bigger space than the 90th meridian to the East Coast. And the 20% of the people that live in the West Coast, around 50 million of them are along the Pacific coast, from, Southern Cal all the way up to Washington State. And that adds up to about maybe a good 60% of the people on the West Coast. The remainder of the cities in the West only account for a mere 20 million people in a space bigger than 90th Meridian, which is from the central of part of Texas vertically all the way up to Canada to the East Coast. That space, if you ignore the West Coast, only has 20 million people in it. And that space is bigger than the 90th Meridian to the East Coast. So basically, meaning most of that space is empty. There's not too many people there. 20 million people sounds like a lot. There's more than 20 million people in New York City for a space that big. You guys have to, think about it in that sense. But I was chastised. They didn't want to hear from me. I got muted, then blocked. I ran into one of the creators in another call, and she tried to call me out, and I busted her out for that. And then I showed her the proof, and she had nothing to say. But that was because it was on a different call. So, maybe I got lucky on that one. But if you challenge their thinking or their beliefs too much, you're in the wrong place. Um, Sometimes I do sit down and I ask them, is this more of an issue where you have enough information to think you're right, but you don't have enough information to know that you're wrong? Is that what's really going on in this situation? And usually they can't answer that. Usually they get offended. So be careful offending them once again, because they'll just cut you out. You know, but I've found something online called the sign method. You know, and this was actually very interesting to it's interesting thing to me. It's more for the woke mentality, but it literally stands for shame someone, insult them, guilt them into believing something, and then having the need to be right. This is something that is claimed on the internet anyway. That is for the feminist movement and supporters, but I think woke people actually use this tactic very well. If you don't agree with us, we'll cancel you. Cancel culture. So that's something that I really wish would change, because having a need to be right does not mean you're right. But if you remain untriggered in some of these calls, they will target you personally. You can actually prevail in a lot of these things. And sometimes you can learn something, you can see something from their perspective. They can learn from you, even if sometimes they're not willing to. But sometimes I am curious as to where all these ideas are coming from. I mean, you know, there's a movement out there where people I've heard are no longer wanting to be African American and following scams to change their identity to gain land from the government if they can prove they're Indian somehow, or American Indian to be specific. This all sounds kind of ridiculous to me, but once again, people are searching for things that, can relate to them, and if they can take advantage of it, why not? You know? But in conclusion, basically, what I've learned is it's very easy to find someone that fits your ideology on the internet. Okay. And that can be dangerous. But just because someone fits your ideas doesn't necessarily mean they're right. But sometimes it doesn't mean they're wrong either. You have to be able to decipher the fluff. But you also have to be able to test your ideas and prove what you seek. Those are the most important things. You know, they will tell you have to do research when they themselves don't know how to do the proper research to get the information they need. They go in after the fluff and can't really decipher the difference between the fluff and the reality. And then they will steer their conversations to their talking points. The ones that can think outside the box, that can actually have conversations and maybe everyone can learn something from them, are really rare. They don't get too many people in their lives because once again, they're actually open to learning. And some of those people coming into the lives want to hear their perspective defended, not countered, you know? So for the most part, just turn on some of these TikTok lives. There are some good ones. There really are. Some that will actually teach you quite a lot of good things, but avoid most of them. But listen and learn why you need to avoid from them. Learn how to decipher that fluff between what's real and what is not. And I think that's very important, and it can actually teach you quite a lot. You know, I'm okay with people trying to make money, but the misinformation that is being pushed out there is very sad to see. And that's something that I wish could be changed quite a bit, and that would be fair. And for those that can see past the fluff, just be careful. Some of these things will anger you so much that you'll want to hop in there and talk to them. And everything that I've mentioned in this video will pretty much happen to you. So just be aware of that. But, you know, go out there, check it out, see what you think. Let me know in the chat, guys, what you think about some of these TikTok lives. Have you seen some things that maybe you agree with that eventually you found out may not be true, or things you've tested and you're like, whoa, this can't be right, or whatever it may be? I'd like to hear from you guys. So thank you guys for watching, and peace out.